Hello, Americans. You know the news. Now it's time to hear the rest of the story. They say that steel is the backbone of a nation, but for a few decades in a corner of Pennsylvania, it was also the soul of a summer. Go back with me to the year 1910. The sky over Johnstown, Pennsylvania is the color of a bruised plum, thick with the soot of progress. Bethlehem steel is growing. They have an appetite for water that would make a desert weep. They need millions of gallons a day to keep those great American furnaces roaring. Now Bethlehem Steel could have tapped into the town's pipes. They could have left the kitchen taps of every hard-working family in the valley running dry while the company coffers grew fat. But they didn't. Instead, they went out into the Somerset Hills. They bought the land, they moved the timber, and they built the Quemahoning Reservoir. Stand on the shores of the Quemahoning, and you might see the ripples of a dream that started with a promise. It was 1947, and the furnaces of Bethlehem Steel were roaring so loud you could hear the prosperity and the heartbeat of Johnstown. The company decided that the men who managed the molten iron, the supervisors who stood between the fire and the exit, deserved something special. They called it Bethco Pines. It wasn't just a park. It was a 500-acre bribe to make a man forget he'd worked the 11 to 7 shift on Christmas Eve. It was a sanctuary where the air didn't taste like the specialized blend of sulfur, coal, and iron ore dust that filled the valley below. Bethco was a promise. It was the company saying, you give us your back, you give us your lungs, you give us your best years, and we'll give your kids a place where the sun never sets. You know, it's funny. Local folks called the Bethco families management, like they were the guys in the high-rises in Pittsburgh. They weren't. They were just the guys standing between the fire and the exit managing the production, and ultimately just managing the inevitable. By 1962, the baby boom was booming, and Bethlehem Steel decided they had outgrown the old swimming hole. For these men and their families, the company renovated Bethco and built a statement in concrete. 3 massive basins of shimmering turquoise carved right into the hill. JFK was president, and this new frontier smelled like fresh cement and copper tone. The pools, a perfectly paved tennis court, beautiful grounds, and beyond it all, surrounding the peninsula, the vast deep blue of the Quemahoning. The sun reflected off the turquoise water of the 3 pools, casting dancing light onto the lodge steps. These weren't just stairs. They were a masterpiece of industrial craftsmanship. Expert Bethlehem masons took rustic native Pennsylvania flagstone and laid it with such precision that the tiers formed perfectly flat, elegant curves. Kids ran up the steps from the pool, their footprints leaving dark circles on the expertly laid stone that would be dry again in seconds in the summer sun. Of course, all the kids on the swim team in their matching swim trunks would line up on those flagstone steps for the annual team photos. They stood shivering in the shade of gargantuan pines, mugging for the camera. Their fathers slumped nearby in webbed lawn chairs, eyes closed after working a night shift, newspapers over their faces to block the sun. Then there was the lodge, a captain's quarters of white vertical siding where the smell of fried shrimp from the dining room was thick enough to chew. Cases of Rolling Rock pony bottles, Iron City, and Carling Black Label awaited hard-working dads in the bar. High on a wooden shelf in the corner of the lounge sat a small black-and-white television. There was no cable, no remote, and usually nothing but static unless the antenna is dialed in just right. Of course, folks didn't come to the Pines to watch TV, but if there was a thunderstorm or a good Pirates game on, they'd huddle under that shelf. They only got one station, clearly. WJAC-TV Channel 6. On the flickering screen, the iconic station ID would appear. A deep, resonant voice announces the slogan, serving millions from atop the Alleghenies. Outside, up on the hill overlooking the lodge, the grass was a manicured carpet of green. The air was a thick blend of charcoal, chlorine, and pine trees. Moms lifted Tupperware containers out of Scotch-plaid coolers, revealing glass bottles of soda sweating in beds of crushed ice. Dads held court at a gas grill, a line of supervisors standing around with paper plates, debating the morning production numbers at the lower works. For guys who spent 40 hours a week managing men who moved molten iron, at that moment there at Bethco Pines, their biggest concern was the perfect char on a hot dog. Below the hill, the clink-clank of horseshoes provided a rhythmic backdrop. A group of supervisors, still wearing their work khakis but with the sleeves rolled up, are dead serious about a ringer. Nearby, the wooden sheer of shuffleboard pucks sliding across the smooth concrete added to the summer symphony. And over it all, drifting from the speakers mounted on the bathhouse and the lodge and on poles here and there, was the sound of WJAC-FM. The beautiful music format, lush orchestral arrangements of pop hits filling the clearings, making the whole resort feel like a movie set. But you see, the thing about a dream is that eventually the sun has to move. By 1982, the vibrant technicolor of the 60s had faded into the desaturated hues of a new reality. The music changed, and so did the economy. Supervisors had to tell their kids that they were idling the coke batteries. The furnaces were cooling down, and many dads knew what they didn't want to admit. When the steel stops moving, the water in the pool stops moving too. The solid world they knew was being undersold by the rest of the globe. Fast forward a couple decades to 2003. The boys who once dove into shimmering turquoise returned as men, to a scene that looked more like an autopsy than a homecoming. The elegant flagstone was gone, ripped up by thieves and replaced by mud-filled trenches. The water in the pools was no longer blue. It was a black, stagnant foot of rainwater, filled with the charred remains of benches tossed in by vandals. The display cases holding the names of local swim legends had been melted into a mess of plastic and ash. The beautiful music of WJAC-FM was replaced by the whistle of wind through broken glass and the sagging shelves of a forgotten era. In the end, the Hooversville Volunteer Fire Department was scheduled to come out and destroy the buildings. They called it a controlled burn, a training exercise. It really seemed like more of a Viking funeral. Perhaps this was appropriate for a place built by the heat of blast furnaces. Bethlehem Steel gave its men a place where their children could be the lucky ones. For a little while, they gave them a life away from the smoke, but they couldn't give them forever. Bethco Pines was ultimately replaced by a new church athletic camp. New kids, new stories. They won't know about the supervisors or the Bethlehem Steel decals on the station wagons in the parking lot. They won't know that for 46 years this seemed like the only place on earth where the air didn't taste like iron. But the Bethco kids remember. And now you know the rest of the story.